Hey, welcome back to the Grampian. We got a special treat for you today. As you know, I only invite authors where I've actually read the book and loved it. So call it the Grampian Book Club of the Month. But today you're going to hear about Dances with Fire. Hang on, we're bringing in the author. Welcome back, Grampian Nation.
In 2013, I coined the name Grampian, and I gave it to your host, Jim Tracy.
Yeah, Grampian Nation, here we are, and boy, do I have a treat. This is Kate Hamberger, and I have known her for a bunch of years, but I did not know about this Kate. I knew about the genteel, kind, uh, mom kind of Kate, and all of a sudden I read this book, Dances with Fire, and I thought, Kate, who in the world are you? I don't know you anymore. So, Kate, welcome to the show. Welcome to Grampian Nation. Tell us a little bit about who you are, because I don't know anymore.
Thank you, Jim. Thanks for having me. My story, I decided to write it because I'm just an ordinary person, and suddenly I find myself in extraordinary circumstances. And everybody can have that opportunity if they take if there's a fork in the road and they have an opportunity to do something completely beyond their comfort zone, and they take it, and suddenly they find themselves in a place where it's like, oh man, what have I done? and and it all started, yes, at Oregon State University. I was a freshman on the rowing team just because I loved being outside.
Okay, time out, time out. Rowing team. Now I'm thinking Harvard, Yale, Princeton. I'm on that uppity up. This is really hard stuff. This rowing team, they're pretty serious.
Yeah, I mean, watch the movie Boys in the Boat, right?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I was in the best shape of my life.
Uh
And
huh.
we had the Pac-10 rowing competition, the regatta down in on the Sacramento River, or American River in
Hmm.
Sacramento. And our boat, which was mostly freshmen, we took third place overall, and we weren't supposed to do better than 13th. And so that was a major accomplishment. And so
Yeah.
I
So cool.
introduce my fire story with a rowing story because that's how it started. Little did I know, my coach came up to me and said, "You're coming back next year, right?" And he was asking all of us in the boat. And I'm like, well, I'm going to need a good paying summer job because I got here on scholarship. And little did I know that he had a connection with someone in the Forest Service who hired
Sure.
folks for the Hotshot crew and the other fire crews.
Yeah, and for our audience, I want them to know that I expected to read this book about a hot shot, and I open it up and I'm reading about this collegiate athlete, and I'm like going, "What? This is not matching up." But you really take that thread and pull it all the way through the book, which adds, I mean, when you're talking about this book, you're talking about drama and exertion and heroism and emotion and lots. It's just too big for me to unpack. So I'm going to let you go on. Help our help our folks understand first, what is a hotshot.
So, in the Pacific Northwest, so many towns are surrounded by national forests. And when we get a wildfire, there needs to be crews that are trained specifically for fire suppression, fire management, fire prevention, all those things. And hotshots are 20-person crews who are expected to be in peak physical condition in order to be the ones to do initial attack. So, one of those spotters spots a fire, a wildfire, and the best way to fight a fire is to get almost ahead of it, while it's still small. A crew can get dropped in either by helicopter or, drive up a windy mountain road and then hike for miles and then start your line construction while hopefully you're getting some air support, a water drop or a retardant drop or something. But,
Hmm.
the hot shots are the ones that in established fires and big, huge wildfires, they're the ones that are put in positions that are probably the most difficult, that take more skill than
And you run through
the
that in the
average.
book because you're literally running uphill, dragging hose, dragging tools. I mean, the physical nature of this occupation that you describe in the book is flabbergasting. It just stunned me. And I'm like thinking, here's this, 130-pound girl, and she's like running up a mountain all geared up with the wrong size boots, and I'm like, the admiration that I developed because of your ability to explain this is just over the top. It's just over the top. You now, so number one, you guys, I'm going to tell you right now, if you haven't yet, whether it's on Kindle or it's probably coming out on Audible someday, but go get Dances with Fire, Amazon. Where else can you get it? Barnes and Noble, that kind of thing.
Yeah, it's on the Ingram catalog, so all you have to do is ask for it at any
Go to your
bookstore.
favorite bookstore, get this book. That's what I'm saying. Anyway, I'm sorry.
Thank
I
you.
digress. So, Hotshot is the tip of the spear tool for the National Forest Service, for the National Park Service, for the Bureau of Land Management, for basically the western half of the U.S. for now. and you were the tip of the spear.
And smoke jumpers, don't forget about them.
Yeah. Okay.
And a lot of
So,
times people confuse smoke jumpers with hot shots. And the only
yeah.
difference is, the smoke jumpers jump out of airplanes. We don't do
Yeah,
that.
yeah. So the point of entry, but you are actually dropped off in choppers, and there's a big part of aviation. Aviation family, there's really cool stuff in this book too. So a hot shot, tip of the spear, you're fighting fires. Why did you? So go back to the rowing team. You're talking to your coach, and he says, "I know how to make some money."
Yeah. Well, it just so happens that I grew up in the town of Prineville, which is in central Oregon, surrounded by national forests. And it wasn't just me. That coach, I think he got five of us rowers positions on various fire crews around Prineville. And because I had grown up there, I thought, well, I could give this a shot. And so I had no idea what I was getting into. And there is absolutely no way I would have made it on the crew if I hadn't been in such good physical condition when I started with the crew.
All right. So you're going from a collegiate athlete rower to a completely different skill set, different muscles, different. I mean, you read the book, and I'm feeling bad for your hands, and I'm feeling bad for your feet, and all this stuff that you're wearing out. So, um, tell us about your entrance into the hotshot world because it's a male dominated.
Yeah. Um, hmm. Well, one thing that I stress, I had a lot of people who, they read a story or I tell them a story and they say, how in the world did you do that? And over the years, as I get older, I've asked myself, how in the world did I do that? I think one thing is, the first time we went out to learn how to, dig fire line, and I'm swinging a Pulaski and it's hot out and I'm not liking the job very much at all. But what are you going to do? I mean, you can't throw in the towel and walk away. So many times when we're tempted to quit, because it's getting hard and we're uncomfortable and it's pretty miserable, and you think I'm going to quit, and then you finally, the job ends, you go home, you go back to the station, you get a paycheck, and you're like, I'm not quitting. That helicopter ride was fun. I want to keep going at this. And Not to mention the reward of that sense of accomplishment
Mm,
and the adventure. And, yeah, you step across the threshold into the unknown. Every fire is different. Every situation is different. The people that you're working with is different. Your air support and ground support is different. You never know what, every day it's like, what does this day hold? And
yeah.
so,
Yeah, and it's a total team environment. So from the rowing team, I mean, if you're not all working in unison, you get a bad time. In the fire
absolutely.
service, if you're not working in unison, somebody's going to get killed. It's a little different depth of commitment, isn't it?
Yes, but it's the same level or more so of accountability because when you're digging line, when you're brushing out for a sawyer, when you're sawing, all the things, you're surrounded by people. They can tell if you're slacking and they'll call you on it. But same
Oh
with,
yeah.
being on the rowing team is people right behind you and right in front of you. They can tell if you're out of sync. They can tell if you're not giving it 100%.
Yeah.
So you're right. There is huge accountability, but also the reward of working that tightly with a group of people to accomplish something that needs to happen is so rewarding.
Yeah. Cuz similar to a tower crew that's on the road 24/7, for weeks at a time, you're deployed and you don't just like work with these people your 8-hour shift. This is like a 24-hour shift for 7 days at a time. You don't get to leave their company. So if you're not pulling your weight, you're gonna get whacked pretty hard, aren't you?
Oh yeah, big time. And that's what is a universal truth. No matter where you are, no matter what job you're in, uh, there are times when you're working with somebody that's really hard for you to work with. There's times when you're in a bad mood and you got to figure out how to work through it. And maybe you don't like your boss or your boss doesn't like you. How do you navigate those circumstances and triumph in that
Yeah,
situation?
for sure. Figure it out, right? At some point, even when you're 18, you were 18 years old, 19
Yeah.
years old, figure it out. And you did this for 6 summers, right?
Yeah, I wanted to pay for college.
You wanted to pay for college. Well, that's a good thing. But you talked about the Pacific Northwest, but I mean, you went to some, I mean, when you describe in the book the Yellowstone fire, this is scary stuff. I mean, really scary stuff. And the one in North Idaho, but you went other places too.
Yeah, all over the country. Yellowstone was unique in that I had never been in a situation where we get called to a fire. I was on the helitack crew that year out of Prineville, but we got called to that
Hmm.
fire. We were the first helicopter. It was just a little Bell 206, and they had us come there for reconnaissance because at the time the Park Service, their mode of operation was just in the wilderness you let fires burn, and they had, well, maybe they did have an idea how badly it was going to blow up, but it was like 2 weeks 3 weeks into the fire that they realized, yeah, we gotta try to stop this. But it
We're in
was one of
trouble.
those, yeah, it.
Yeah.
And by the end of that fire there were 70 helicopters on that fire.
Wow. Wow. And when you detail some of this stuff in the book, you're talking about how these hotshot crews literally saved not just homes and structures and the Old Faithful Inn, uh, but
Yeah,
about how
that was
how
amazing.
you kept fires from taking towns out, like entire towns.
Well, that was a massive suppression operation that involved, you know, obviously not just hot shots, but everybody was, engine crews. I want to say hundreds of engine crews. A lot of engine
Yeah,
crews were out there spraying foam, spraying water, and retardant planes, and
yeah.
just
All hands on
massive
deck.
air support, bulldozers, and to no avail sometimes. When you have a 40-mile-an-hour wind, all you can do is get out of the way. You're not stopping
Yeah.
that thing.
No kidding. No kidding. And so, um, I try to in the book you did such a great job, but people don't understand. I mean, there's a lot of fear. There's a fear of public speaking. There's a fear of heights. There's a fear of spiders, but it's a new level when you're confronting a wall of flame. What is that fear like?
You know, I have to say here that because of excellent leadership in our crew bosses, our crew superintendents, they weren't afraid. The men I worked with and the women I worked with, they didn't seem to be afraid. And so I wasn't, first of all. And, I was young, and maybe, when you're that young, you don't think
Bulletproof.
about the danger so much. But that fire in Arizona that I experienced, I was scared. There was a blow up, there was a
Hmm.
firestorm, and
Brief us on that. What was a
mm,
firestorm and how did you get caught in it?
so the fire was called the Dude Fire, not far from Prescott, Arizona, and we arrived there early in the morning. That was 1990. I was on the Alpine Hotshot crew, and we got there early, and the plan was to burn out before around the subdivision of kind of vacation home structures, and we were doing all that. And then at about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I want to say, they brought in a new command, and so they were trying to get all the radio frequencies all aligned, and one group was taking over command system. And but at the same time that the helicopters came down to get briefed in this meeting, at the same time there was a storm front moving in, thunderheads, and thunderheads have a tendency to push air in all four directions. We couldn't see it because of the inversion layer in the canyon, and so it kind of caught us by surprise. And all of a sudden, it can be just a matter of seconds when you get
Yeah.
a,
Downdraft.
yeah. And so, I have a clear memory of moving up that canyon side as fast as my legs would move me. It was pretty steep. And I just remember thinking, all of a sudden, I had never had the thought before, I might not make it out of this fire. But, that was one situation where I was like, it was terrifying. But
Wow.
so many thoughts are going through your mind at the same time. Plus, your eyes are tearing from the smoke. Plus, you're coughing because of all the intense smoke that just came in all of a sudden. Plus, you're breathing hard from the exertion of getting out of that canyon, and you're hearing people yelling, and the sound of a firestorm. That in and of itself, maybe it's like a tornado coming at you. I don't know, but it's I've read a lot of people say it's like a freight train coming at you or a jet taking off. It's that big of a sound.
Pretty loud.
Yeah.
Pretty loud. So you're on sensory overload,
Yes.
and now you've added to that for the first time that, hey man, I might like this is really sketch. I might not make it out of here. So
Yeah.
what do you do then?
I started praying.
All right.
Uh,
That's always a good answer.
yeah. I mean, at that point, the situation is so much bigger than we are, that
Yeah.
okay, maybe I need a miracle here. And
Yeah.
Lord, help us get out of this, help us get back to the safety zone. And just, Lord, could you move that fire's direction just a little bit? so we
Yeah.
can make it, that kind of thing, while my life is kind of passing before my eyes, and I'm like, am I going to see
Yeah.
my mom again? All those things.
Crazy. So then you're running uphill, you're breathing smoke, you can't see very far because of the smoke, plus you're tearing up, and you got to be freaking out, and you're praying. How does this end? I mean, how did you come out of this?
Well, see, up till about noon, we were burning out an area to, slow and change the direction of the fire. And so our safety zone was that burned out the black area.
Hmm.
And so we made it just, I feel like, in the nick of time. We all got into the black, and the fire went right, past us. And
Then do you
there was
cover up or something in that, or
no, we didn't deploy shelters because we had made it into the black far enough. We
okay?
knew at that point we were safe, but there were
All right.
firefighters below us that did deploy shelters.
Uh-huh.
And in fact, there were 6 fatalities at that fire just below us.
Mm, wow. And that's a lot to deal with too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. So, number one, thank you for taking care of um, for taking care of the people. I mean, the woods and the trees are all wonderful and stuff like that, but at some point, it's going to burn anyway. So, thank you for taking care of the people, the homes, the structures, and there's some other places that you worked, like that I wouldn't have expected. Like I never expected to hear about somebody down in Florida fighting a fire
In the Everglades, right?
in the Everglades. That's crazy.
It is crazy. A very unusual dry spell in the Everglades. Had had the Park Service down there, I think, worried. They didn't want another Yellowstone on their hands, coming towards the towns. And so our job was primarily, there is a monsoon season in June. This was in June. And so they knew that, well, they were hoping that at some point the rains would come. But until then, they
Sure.
wanted firefighters to help them kind of direct the fire to, and the best way to do that is to kind of burn around the areas that you don't want to burn. You don't want uncontrolled fire to burn. And then
Right.
but that was a pretty miserable fire. I remember, that stands out in my memory because the minute we got off the plane in Florida, sweat started to trickle down my spine. And
Oh
that didn't
yeah.
stop until we got back on the plane. But
Yeah.
fortunately, the monsoons came within, I think it was 5 days of us
Oh,
being
okay.
down there.
So you
But,
had 5 days in the Everglades
right.
and gators. I mean,
We didn't see any.
critters.
Yeah. They told us to watch out for, cottonmouths, and
Oh
that made
my.
us all a little jumpy, but we didn't see any of those either. Thank the
Yeah.
Lord.
Yeah. So, and being from snake country, and you have a Pulaski, you know how to handle them, right?
Well, that's the thing about that fire is we came without tools because a Pulaski's not going to do you any good in a swampland with
Oh yeah.
sawgrass. When we
Yeah.
got off the plane, when we got to the fire, they handed us what they called flappers, which it looks like a semi truck's mud flap on a broom handle, and we're whacking at the sawgrass to put the flames out. It was so hot. I mean, you're right by
Oh
the flame.
man.
And so you're sweating from the fire, you're sweating from the humidity. And it wasn't long. It was like within hours or within a day, we were having heat rash and all these things that we hadn't
Bugs.
experienced before. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. And you did some stuff in Georgia as well, right?
Yes. That was the same year as the Dude Fire, 1990. We got sent to Georgia, And there we had an assignment to protect this old, they called it a historic landmark. And so we were swamping out this area around this old wooden bridge that had some stagnant water running through it. And so
Oh
guess what?
my.
We found some cottonmouths. I couldn't believe it, like to the tune of 5 water moccasins in
Oh
that
wow.
area. And we
Yeah.
had a group of men there. I was the only woman on that crew. And that group of men, they were, you know, on average older, and they were, eco-friendly, and they had no qualms about, going up. One guy would put his shovel behind the neck of the snake, and another guy would reach behind the shovel head and pick that snake up and say, check it out, a water moccasin.
Oh, that's a hard pass. I don't want
Yeah,
anything to do with
yeah.
them. Yeah. Wow. So, how did this experience, the broader experience, build your character?
One thing I touch on in this book is the development of my faith, trusting the Lord. And so many times the situation was so intense that I would just be praying, Lord, give me strength. Lord, give me strength. In fact, one of my favorite Bible verses is Psalm 84:5, which is, blessed are those whose hearts are set on pilgrimage, whose strength is in you, whose hearts are set in on pilgrimage. And so many times, somehow, I don't know how, I persevered. I got just, an ounce more endurance to get me through
Hmm.
that minute, that hour. And, that carries on for the rest of my life.
Sure.
Number one, trusting that the Lord will be with me and help me through hard things, but also, not being as afraid to attempt hard things that you
Yeah.
don't know. I might fail, this may not work, but giving it a
Right.
try. So, and I guess they call that resilience, they call it grit. But every woman that I've ever talked to, and I say, how did you benefit from being a wildland firefighter? And almost every one of them at some point say, everything I did after being a hotshot, every accomplishment I had was because I was less afraid to attempt a hard thing, doing hard
Yeah.
things and overcoming difficulty and challenge. It's just easier to do because, for all that time, you've learned how to deal with that hard thing and overcome obstacles.
Yeah. After running up a mountain in the smoke and choking and blind and auditory train coming at you, everything probably seems easy.
Easier,
Easier.
maybe. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Less
So,
difficult.
when did you decide that it would be a good idea to memorialize this in a book? And then that is, as an author myself, I can tell you that this was a slow process for me, but it's not like that for everybody. Was there a moment where you said, I need to like write this?
You know, I remember a moment. So, let's go back to when I finished what I thought was my last summer of firefighting. It's a long story that I share in the book, but I study massage therapy. As you can imagine, I was very interested in how to lengthen my muscles and, help them be looser and whatnot. So I became a certified and then later licensed massage therapist. And I remember one day at my house, I was giving my niece a shoulder massage, and she asked me a question, like, Aunt Katie, how do you know that hurt? that muscle in my shoulder hurt? And I'll say, well, because, I was often sore there when I was firefighting. And she grabbed my hand and turned to look at my eyes, and she's like, wait, you were a firefighter? And I was like, you don't know that?
Yeah.
And I thought she should know that. She should hear these stories. And I told a few friends a few fire stories, and one particular friend, Rhonda Hadlock, she's like, you have to write these down. These are
Yeah.
incredible stories. And that got me to thinking. And then I was like, I don't even know where to begin. You know, how does one start writing a book? And she's like, you need to go to a writer's conference. And so I did. I went to my
Right
first
on.
writers conference and was completely overwhelmed at the task. But they said, take it one step at a time, write a little bit every day. And so I taped up a timeline in front of my desk, and stories would come to my mind, and I'd put them on the timeline. And then there was a period of time where I'd sit down and say, okay, I'm going to write about that today. And
Wow.
I started with the fun stories, the fun things to tell about, that were humorous, that I looked back at and chuckled about, but I started to look at the harder stories, and sometimes I didn't even believe my own memory about it. Like, did this really happen? To the point that I emailed a one of my former squad bosses, and I'm like, hey, Brian, did that really happen? This is, read this and tell me, am I imagining things, or did that really happen? And I'll never forget, he wrote back, it happened. And that's it. That's all he said.
Because some of the stuff that you relay in the book is, I mean, it is, I'm not going to say it's unbelievable, but it's pretty crazy. And so if you're looking for action, adventure, emotion, a gifted storyteller, how long did it take you to write this book?
7 years.
Wow. And how many rewrites did you do?
Countless. I can't even answer
Untold.
that. Yeah.
I tell everybody writing a book's easy. Editing it is as painful as, yeah, as more painful than any dentist appointment.
Especially a memoir, because when I started, I'd be like, okay, I'm going to write about this, but I'm not going to write about that.
Yeah.
And then I'd hear a voice, maybe it was God, saying, I want you to write about that too, because
Yeah.
other people are going to need to hear, you need to share that. And
Hey, the hard
hopefully,
stuff is part of what makes this book magic. So, you have been selected for the Tucson Festival of Books to present at one of the largest festival of book festivals in the entire United States. You're going to be on like the stage talking about Dances with Fire. Congratulations.
thank you.
Yeah, and I'm
Pretty
sure that there's
excited.
more great stuff to come. I only invite people on here to talk about books that I've actually read. I don't just do it for fun. I actually have to have read it and I loved it. And what I can tell you is that I've recommended it, and the people who I recommended to came back to me and they said, thank you for putting this piece of work in front of me because it's amazing. And so I want to thank you, Kate. If you have a piece of advice, so you got the 18-year-old um, person comes to you and says, I don't really have enough money for college. What should I do? What would you tell them?
I mean, it depends on the person. Do they like being outside? Do they, not everybody could be a hotshot, I don't think. It helped that
Hmm.
I grew up with four older brothers that were super athletic, and I was pretty physical myself. And so, first of all, you would need that for me to recommend, hey, you should check out, the Forest Service, or something to do with forest management.
Uh-huh.
And for sure, if I can tell that someone has that bent, I would absolutely recommend, check out firefighting. But I would kind of vet them and see if they would
Yeah.
thrive in that situation.
Because you got to be a good teammate. I mean, everybody talks about leadership, but being a good teammate is just as important as, because if you're not a good teammate, you're not going to follow a leader anyway. So,
Yeah.
anyway, thanks for coming on the Grampian. Our folks are going to love it. Again, Dances with Fire: Lessons in Life, Faith, and Firefighting by Kate Hamberger, who is from our part of our wireless family and part of the Grampian Nation now. Kate, thanks for coming on. We appreciate you. This is Jim. Thanks again to Kate for coming on, and we are out.
Thank you, Jim.
When you get an opportunity, subscribe or follow wherever you get your podcast.